So now, as you can see, I have completed the mouth, but I am still going to go back and touch it up a bit where I feel that the shading needs to be darkened to accentuate the shadows. And then I'm going to start in on the jawline. This is where having drawn in my jawline beforehand comes in very handy. This way I don't have to try and measure the jawline and have it thicker and wider than his jawline actually is. I'm giving it some contour here before coming around to the other side and shading in that side. Now, because he is smiling, he does have quite rounded cheeks, so I'm going to accentuate that as well with my shading. And as I had said before, there are no straight white parts on the human face. You will always have some shading to shade in. Giving him his smile lines. Now for his chin, because his chin is a higher point on his face, like the tip of his nose, that is going to be left as a highlight. So it's going to be a lot lighter shading, so you can see that the light is shining from that direction. Whereas right under his lip, you'll have a darker shade. I'm blending with my blender to give it a much more natural feel. This way I don't have to actually put pencil everywhere with the actual pencil lead. When you're shading, you can pull the pencil from the shadows that you've already created to fill in areas that need the shadow as well. Now I will be going back and I'll be adding in some more depth and darkness to the shadows with a darker pencil. A lot of portraiture and creating of the shadows is layering of the different darknesses of the pencil lead, or the different softness of the pencil lead. So now I'm going back to darken certain points on the face that are more hidden in shadow. Using my blending stump, you can see that it picks up that pencil really nicely to lengthen and widen and deepen the shadows. One of the most important things when you are drawing a portrait is to check your reference picture that you're drawing often. Have it beside you and check it often. So eyelids usually have some shading on them, as they are more sunken in than the eyebrows. And go in with your blending pencil, blending stub as it's called, and get rid of all those distinct pencil lines to give it a nice shade. I'm taking my gum eraser and I'm just dabbing it on his eyelids because I felt that I got them a little too dark, and I like that better. Never be afraid to go back and fix up something that you feel that you've maybe not gotten the right shape, or you've made too dark, or you haven't made dark enough. So now I'm going to outline his hair that frames his forehead, and give his forehead some nice shadow. Once again, like the chin and like the tip of the nose, the center of the forehead is your high point, so it will have the least amount of shading. So as you can see, with my pencil, I used it to shade in around the outside of the forehead, and then I used the blending stub to pull that pencil in to the center of the forehead to give it a really nice blended appearance. Now I'm going to outline his hair. I'm going to start penciling in his hair. So when drawing hair, I usually do it in chunks because hair is never uniform. You always have highlights and lowlights, and by doing it in chunks, then you can create your highlights and lowlights, have certain darker strands over top of other hair, and just create a really create a much more defined look rather than have it just be one block of color, or block of pencil I should say. I don't use my blending stub at all when I'm doing the hair because hair is strands, so you don't want it to look like it is just a solid mass on top of his head. So you'll see in more detail as I go here how I block out the hair and create it in chunks. Apologize for being off the screen here a bit. As you can see, I'm using my mat, and that way my hand isn't rubbing against the parts of his face that I've already drawn, so I'm not smudging everything. So I'm overlaying some strands with other strands. I want to create a lot of depth with the hair. Hair is one thing that a lot of people struggle to draw, but my best advice for you for drawing hair is don't color it in. Leave it looking like strands. And every little piece where his hair sits on his head doesn't need to have pencil on it. Once again, you're creating the highlights and lowlights. I'm accentuating the hair that covers the eye so you can see it a lot better. Because Jungkook has dark hair, I don't have to worry about trying to keep it looking as if it's light or blonde. I can give it that depth and darkness. And now I start to block my hair out again. I'm leaving that chunk there, that little chunk there without pencil in it, because that is where the light shone on his hair, and that's where it, not reflected, but yeah, that's where the light shone off his hair. As you can see, I'm overlaying some of his hair on top of the stuff I've already shaded in to give it that depth and appearance of strands and not just a helmet on top of his head. I'm just gonna shade in his ears, and he wears earrings, so I'll add those. Always use your mat when you're going to be doing any drawing where your hand will rest on what you've already created. So now that I've done the base layer on the hair, now I'm going to go back over certain areas with a darker pencil to accentuate those low lights. This way I give the hair a lot more depth, and you can it gives it a lot more of a feel of the hair actually being strands. I'm not going to go over his entire head with the darker pencil because I want to keep those low lights and highlights visible. So you can see I've added some flyaways around the outside. No one's hair is perfect. Not even BTS's. A lot of these highlights and lowlights that I'm adding in are by feel, because the picture itself, his hair looks very dark in it. He has very dark hair in it. So I'm just going by what I feel would be the highlights and lowlights. Then I add the bottom underneath his ears. Stuff that would be wrapping around his neck at the back. And I'm quite happy with his hair. So here I'm removing some of the definition I had put on his jaw, because I found that by narrowing his jaw as much as I did, it gave him a very feminine appearance, and he has a much more wider defined jaw. As always, if you see something you don't necessarily like, you can always erase it and redo it. And now that I have removed that definition, I've found that I like his jawline a lot better. And it's a lot truer to him. So I'm going to add in my shadow of his chin on his neck. And he has a little bit of a fold there because he's got his arm up and around the chair beside him. when you're doing the Adam's apple, you don't actually draw in the Adam's apple. You shade around it to create the shadows that accentuate the fact that he has an Adam's apple. Now I'm going to put in my shirt neckline and his shoulder line. And for this drawing, I'm just going to color in his shirt a solid color because he is wearing a black shirt. Normally, if they were wearing a shirt that had more color to it and I had a color photo, I'd know where the shadows are for the folding fabric, but with the shirt that he's wearing, I was unable to actually see the shadows. So I'm just going to color in the whole thing dark. And in the end, it looks fine. I'll take my blending stub and blend all that pencil together so that you don't have a definitive blocking where you can tell where the pencil overlapped each other when I was coloring. I'll do that on both sides. So now I'm just going to go back and I'm going to touch up the few things that I see that I need to either darken or get rid of. Here I'm widening out his nostril a bit, so I found that I had made his nose a little too narrow. Jungkook has quite a wide nose, so I want to make sure I stay true to that as I check my reference picture. That's how I see it, and there you go. I'm going to fix up his mouth a little bit more and then remove what I fixed. And at that point I say I'm going to stop playing with it.
And can you just tell me where people can find out more about you and your work and possibly get a hold of you for commissions?
You can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is Itty Bitty Kitty Cartoons, and Rhonda will link to it in the description of this video. If you would like to commission a portrait, just drop me a PM and I will gladly do a portrait for you. I do portraits with animals as well as just people.
If you're enjoying this video, please like and subscribe and stay tuned to my channel because we will be doing more tutorials with Laura in the future. And tell me down in the comments whether you have ever tried to draw or paint a portrait before and what was the most challenging thing and what was the most rewarding thing.
The most difficult thing about portraiture for me would be shading. I really struggled with shading when I first started. If I were to show you the first portrait I did when I first got back into it late last year, it looks nothing like the person I was trying to draw. I had certain areas way too dark. I didn't shade other areas properly. It was not pretty. So that would be the hardest thing for me. The easiest thing for me, I love drawing eyes. They would probably be the easiest thing. Mouths are a little harder, but I really like drawing eyes.